A pregnant woman walked 2 miles in the snow to a stranger's gate and said, "I won't ask for charity, just let me work." The ex-Army Ranger almost said no. His dog didn't let him. Hit subscribe if you want to see what happened next. The November wind moved across Bitterroot Valley the way it always did, without asking permission, without apology. It pressed through the gaps in the old fence boards, curled around the weathered posts, and settled into the yard like it owned everything it touched. Cole Harker stood at the edge of the north pasture, hammer in hand, working through the kind of cold that didn't announce itself. It just arrived and stayed. The farm stretched behind him, 80 acres of Montana land that had once fed a family, hosted summers of noise and motion, and smelled like something worth coming home to. That was before. Now it was quiet in the way that has nothing to do with peace. Cole had come back to Harker Ranch in the spring of 2020, after 12 years as an Army Ranger, 2 deployments to Afghanistan, 1 to Iraq, and a final tour that ended not with enemy fire but with paperwork and a handshake at Fort Benning. He had returned to Montana because there was nowhere else that made sense. The land was his. Rex moved beside him, a 6-year-old German Shepherd with a slight hitch in his left rear leg, a reminder of a pressure plate outside Kandahar that neither of them talked about. Rex had been Cole's K-9 partner. Cole had requested to keep him. The Army, for once, said yes. They were both still learning what that meant. The room at the end of the hallway stayed closed. Cole had not opened it since the winter of 2019, when a 2-car accident on Route 93 took his wife Sarah and the child she was 8 months along with carrying. He had built a pine cradle that summer, joints hand-fitted, edges sanded smooth. It sat in the back of the equipment shed beneath a canvas sheet, untouched. Cole never moved it. He never threw it away. Some things a man keeps, not because he's ready to, but because getting rid of them would mean something he isn't prepared to decide yet. He set the hammer down, looked across the field, and Rex lifted his head beside him. Neither of them expected anything to change that afternoon. Rex stopped first, not with a bark, with stillness, the kind that came before a decision, not after one. Cole followed the dog's line of sight toward the gravel road that led up from Route 12, and there she was. A woman moved slowly up the drive, pulling a worn rolling suitcase behind her, the wheel catching in the frozen ruts every few steps. One hand gripped the handle. The other rested low against her stomach, not dramatically, not for effect, just automatically, the way a person protects what matters most when everything else is uncertain. She looked to be in her mid-20s. Dark coat, scarf loose around her collar, hair pulled back but coming undone at the sides from the wind. Her shoes were not built for this kind of cold or this kind of road. Cole later learned the car had run out of gas 2 miles back on the county road. She hadn't called for help because her phone was dead. She had looked at the map on paper, an actual paper map, folded and creased, and chosen the nearest property. Rex moved ahead 2 steps, then paused and turned his head back toward Cole. It was not a warning posture. It was something else, a question maybe, or a suggestion. Cole had learned to read the dog over 4 years of working and living together. The woman stopped a few yards from the fence. She didn't wave, didn't call out. She simply looked at him with eyes that were steady, despite everything her body language was telling him about exhaustion and cold, and a long series of events that had clearly not gone the way they were supposed to. "I'm not looking for charity," she said. Her voice carried well across the wind. "I can work. Whatever you need on a farm, I can cook, keep books, teach. I was a school teacher. I'll earn my place. I just need somewhere to be until the baby comes." Cole studied her for a moment. Then he looked at Rex. Rex sat down. That was enough. Cole didn't say much on the walk back to the house. He opened the gate, and Nora Callum stepped through, pulling her suitcase over the uneven ground, following him across the yard toward the front porch without ceremony or fanfare. Rex walked slightly ahead of her, not crowding, just present, as if he'd already accepted some responsibility he hadn't been assigned. Inside, the house was orderly but lived in the way a place gets when one person has been managing it alone for a long time. Functional, sparse, nothing wasted, but nothing extra either. Cole pulled a notepad from the kitchen drawer. He wrote 5 lines in the same deliberate way he did everything else, tore the page out, and set it on the table in front of her. Nora read it carefully, and for the first time since she'd arrived, something shifted in her expression, not relief exactly, but recognition. She picked up the pen without asking. Below his 5 lines, she wrote a 6th in her own hand. "I will not accept what I haven't earned. Everything I use, I will pay back through work." She signed her name, date included, and slid the paper back across the table. Cole looked at it for a moment. Then he folded it in half and placed it in the breast pocket of his flannel shirt, close to him, where important things go. "Room at the end of the hall on the left," he said. He had not opened that door in 4 years. He opened it now, checked the window latch, and left without looking back. Bathroom shared. Dinner's at 6 if you cook it. I eat whatever's made. He pulled on his jacket and went back outside. Nora stood in the kitchen, looked around at the walls and the window and the pale winter light coming through the glass. Then set her suitcase down near the wall and got to work. Rex had stayed inside. He lay near the doorway between the kitchen and the hall, watching her with his head on his paws, patient, unhurried. She reached down and briefly rested her fingers on the top of his head. He didn't pull away. The changes came in quiet increments, the kind that are only visible if you're paying attention. And Cole paid attention to everything. It was the training, partly, but it was also the particular alertness of a man who had learned that the most important things rarely announce themselves. Nora moved through the house carefully, adjusting what needed, adjusting without disturbing what didn't. A towel folded instead of left in a heap. A tool returned to the hook it had been taken from. The window above the sink cracked open in the morning to let the overnight air out. Small acts of respect toward a space she hadn't been invited into so much as received by. On the third day, she went into the room Cole used as a kind of unofficial library, a narrow space off the hallway lined with shelves of agricultural books, soil science manuals, sustainable farming guides. She didn't ask permission. She was looking for a mending kit and knocked on the open door out of habit. The book stopped her. She pulled one from the shelf, a worn copy of a regenerative soil guide, and saw notes in the margins, careful and detailed, written in Cole's hand. He'd read all of it. He just hadn't connected it to the actual ground beneath his boots. Rex began guiding her in the days that followed, leading her away from the soft patch near the east fence, pausing at the shed door until she noticed the uneven step. Cole watched this from a distance more than once. The dog had never done this for anyone else. On the 9th evening, Nora set a plate down in front of him without being asked, sat across the table, and they ate in the same silence they always did. But this time, Cole spoke before she stood to clear the dishes. "The soil near the back garden," he said. "What did you change?" she told him. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, he nodded once. "Show me tomorrow," he said. That was all. But it changed the temperature of the room. Diane Harker had driven past the farm twice that week, once on the way to the feed store, once for no reason she would have admitted to. She hadn't stopped. But she had slowed down both times, long enough to see the lights on in the kitchen and a woman moving behind the glass. The storm came down from the Bitterroot Range on a Thursday night, cutting the power by 9 o'clock and dropping 6 inches of snow before midnight. Cole brought wood in from the porch. Nora lit the oil lamps she'd found in the cabinet by the stove. Rex settled on the floor between them, close to the heat. They didn't plan to talk. Nora was humming something low while she knitted, a habit from childhood she'd said once, without context. Cole recognized the melody before he could stop himself from reacting. It was an old song, nothing famous, the kind that passes from one person to another without ever being recorded anywhere. Sarah had sung it in the kitchen on Sunday mornings. He went still. Nora caught it, the way his hands stopped moving, the fraction of change in his expression, and she stopped humming, started to apologize. "Don't," he said. Then, quieter, Sarah liked that one too. It was the first time he'd said her name to another person since the funeral. The fire moved in the grate. Rex's ear twitched. Cole looked at the far wall for a while, then told her, not everything, but enough. The accident. The drive he hadn't taken because a fence contractor had shown up unannounced. The way the hospital had looked at 3 in the morning. When he finished, the room held the particular silence of something that has been said for the first time and can't be unsaid, which is also to say, can't be carried alone anymore. Nora told him about Riverton Elementary, about Brett, about the 23 letters her students wrote to a principal who ignored them. Cole reached into his shirt pocket and set the folded contract on the table between them. He didn't explain the gesture. Cole had called Ray Cutler 2 days before, not about Brett specifically, but about the kind of man Brett was. Ray had listened without interrupting, asked 2 questions, and said he'd make some calls to Missoula. Cole hadn't expected anything to come of it that quickly. Rex heard Brett's car before it reached the gate, not by engine sound alone, but by something in the air that changed the way the dog held himself. He was on his feet before Cole reached the window. 2 vehicles pulled up, a gray sedan and a black SUV with out-of-state plates. Brett Solano stepped out of the sedan in a wool overcoat, moving with the practiced ease of someone accustomed to being the most prepared person in a room. A woman in a blazer followed, carrying a leather portfolio. Cole stepped onto the porch before they reached the gate. Rex came to stand just ahead of him and stopped. Not aggressive, perfectly still, eyes forward. The three visitors stopped walking at the same moment, instinctively, the way people do when something in the environment sends a signal their brain hasn't processed yet, but their body already has. Brett composed himself quickly. "I'm here to speak with Nora Callum," he said, pleasant and measured. "This is her attorney," he gestured to the woman, "and we have documentation regarding the custody arrangement for the child. I'd appreciate a civil conversation." "She's not available," Cole said. "I'm her employer. Anything you need to say goes through proper channels." Brett's expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes shifted. "With respect, Mr. Harker, Mr. Harker. She's living on your property, unemployed, without stable income. A court will have questions about that." Before Cole could respond, a second vehicle turned into the drive. Sheriff Ray Cutler stepped out with a manila folder under his arm and the kind of expression a man gets when he's been looking forward to a conversation. "Brett Solano," Ray said, not as a greeting. "I've been trying to reach your office for about a week." He held up the folder. "Got a call from folks down in Missoula. Something about falsified HR documentation and a school board filing." Brett's attorney put her hand on his arm. They were gone within 20 minutes. Nora stood in the doorway behind Cole, Owen pressing against her ribs. She hadn't made a sound. Cole didn't go into the equipment shed looking for the cradle. He went in on a Saturday morning to find a hinge for the barn door, moving through the organized half-dark, tools hung in rows, old lumber stacked flat, a tarp-covered shape in the far corner he had not looked directly at in over 4 years. He found the hinge. He should have left. He didn't. He pulled the canvas back slowly, the way you do when you already know what's underneath but aren't ready to confirm it. The cradle sat exactly where he'd left it, pine joints tight, the surface dulled with dust but structurally sound. He had built it between deployments in the shop behind the house, over 6 weeks of evenings. Sarah had come out every night to check his progress, always with 2 cups of coffee, always with an opinion about the angle of the side rails. He remembered the specific argument about the spindle spacing that had ended with both of them laughing. He carried it out into the yard, set it in the daylight, and sat down on an upturned bucket. For a while he just looked at it. Then he began cleaning it, cloth, water, wood oil from the shelf, a screwdriver for the loose rear joint. He worked without rushing. Somewhere in the middle of it, he started talking. Not loudly, not performing for anyone. Just talking, the way people sometimes do when they've been holding a conversation in their head for so long it finally needs sound. "I think you'd have liked her," he said. "She's stubborn. Reads everything. Doesn't ask for things she doesn't plan to earn." Rex lay beside the bucket and pressed his muzzle against Cole's knee. Cole didn't stop working. When Nora came to the shed doorway an hour later, she saw the cradle and understood everything without a single word of explanation. She saw the small initials carved into the lower rail, SH 2019. She stood quietly for a moment, then placed her palm flat against the side of the cradle, eyes closed, a gesture directed at someone she'd never met, in a language that doesn't require words. Rex woke first, a single sharp bark, precise, deliberate, the kind that carries a specific meaning to anyone who knows the dog. Cole was already in the hallway by the time the sound fully registered. Nora's door was open. She stood at the frame in the dark, one hand braced against the wood, her breathing controlled but uneven in the way that means a person is working to stay ahead of what their body is doing. "It's time," she said. Cole said, "All right." He was dressed, keys in hand, and the truck was running in under 4 minutes. Rex climbed into the back seat without being told. No one spoke on the drive to Bitterroot Valley Medical Center. The road was empty at that hour, the sky pressing low and dark, the headlights cutting a small tunnel through it. Cole drove at speed but not recklessly, the way a man drives when he's been trained to stay functional under pressure, and it's the only gift he has left to offer. The hospital's intake light was yellow and bright. Cole sat in the hallway outside the room, back flat against the wall, hands rested on his knees. This was the first time he had been inside a delivery ward since the night Sarah didn't come home. He knew this. He stayed anyway. The sounds from inside the room told him very little for a long time, and then they told him everything. A nurse stepped out at 4:47 a.m. "It's a boy," she said. "Mom's asking for you." Cole stood up slowly. Inside the room, Nora held the baby against her chest, small, eyes shut, impossibly still in the way newborns are before they understand the world is large. She looked up when Cole came in. "Owen," she said. "Then, I told them you were family. I hope that's okay." Cole looked at the child for a long moment. "It's okay," he said. Brett filed the custody petition 6 weeks after Owen was born. The paperwork was precise and cold. Plaintiff demonstrates unstable living arrangement, no independent income, no permanent residence. His attorney had clearly done this before. Cole read through the filing twice at the kitchen table, set it face down, and didn't speak for a while. Nora sat across from him, Owen asleep against her shoulder, her expression the particular kind of calm that costs something to maintain. "I'll find a lawyer Monday," she said. "We'll find one," Cole said. He did not look up from the table when he said it. But the word we landed in the room with a weight that neither of them acknowledged directly, because some things are understood better when they're not explained. What neither of them anticipated was Patty Vance. Patty, who ran the feed co-op on County Road 7 and had been watching the Harker property with the attentiveness of a woman who had lived next to that land for 30 years, organized a community meeting at the Copper Falls Lutheran Church on a Wednesday night. 41 people showed up. Ray Cutler in plain clothes. Diane Harker, Cole's mother, who sat in the second row and did not leave early. They signed a community letter, 14 pages. Attached to it were affidavits from 3 neighbors, a character reference from Ray, and a document from Diane that described, in plain specific language, what she had observed about Nora's character over several months of watching a woman she had initially misjudged. Down in Missoula, a video was circulating. A young man, maybe 20, stood in front of a phone camera and talked about his 4th grade teacher, how she'd stayed after school 3 days a week for a year to help him read, how she'd written to his mother when his father left, how she'd been the first adult who'd ever told him directly that he was capable of something. 22 others posted similar videos within 48 hours. The judge dismissed Brett's petition on a Tuesday morning. Brett resigned from the school board the following month. Spring came back to Bitterroot Valley the way it always does in Montana, slowly, without making promises, testing the ground before committing. The snow pulled back from the south-facing slopes first, then the fields, then the low places near the creek that were the last to give up the cold. Cole worked the fence line on a Tuesday in early June, Rex walking the perimeter with him the way they always had, the dog's gait slightly uneven, steady, reliable. At some point during the morning, Cole drove into Copper Falls and came back with a plank of clear pine and a wood-burning kit. He worked in the shop for 2 hours. At noon, he carried the new sign to the front gate and replaced the old one, Harker and Callum Ranch. He hung it level, stepped back, looked at it for a moment, then went inside for lunch without saying anything to anyone. Nora saw it from the kitchen window. She didn't call out to him. She didn't need to. The following Sunday, Diane came by without calling ahead, which was unusual enough that Cole stepped onto the porch when he heard her truck. She came in, set a small wooden box on the kitchen table, and sat down across from Nora. Owen was in the chair between them, working on a piece of bread with the focused intensity of a 7-month-old who has recently discovered opinions. Diane opened the box. Inside was a ring. Simple, gold, worn smooth at the band. "Sarah left this with me the week before the accident," Diane said. "She told me if Cole ever found someone again, give it to her." She said it like she meant it. She slid the box across the table. "I was wrong about you at the start. I want you to know I know that." Nora looked at the ring for a long time. Then she looked at Diane. "Thank you," she said, "for telling me about her." That evening, Cole stood in the yard watching Owen sit in the grass beside Rex, the old dog patient and warm in the last of the afternoon light. Owen reached out and grabbed a fistful of fur. Rex didn't move. Cole looked toward the window and found Nora already looking back. He raised his hand. She raised hers. Then she turned back into the kitchen, and he heard the sound of the stove clicking on, and the house, the old quiet house, filled again with something it had been missing for a long time. Not noise exactly, but the steady, ordinary, irreplaceable sound of people who have chosen to stay. If this story stayed with you, drop a comment telling us which moment hit hardest and what city you're watching from. Subscribe if you want more stories like this one.
Some people arrive in our life, not sweet fanfare, but sweet words too, rusted on jingle, and enough dignity left to make an offer instead of a please. Nora despairs, she worked, calling doesn't recue. He made room that this season matter more than we realize. We live in a world that confuse charity with respect, but true human dignity isn't given, it recognized. Nora knew what she was worth before anyone else. She wrote in it down on a piece of notebook paper and handed it back to the agreement between equal, not a flavor, not spitty, equal ground, and color. A man so broken he couldn't open a door down his own hallway. Learn that healing doesn't come from being left alone. It comes from being just with someone else. So real. The dog understood this before easy or sometimes the rest boy in the room has from her and no other. He was sorry as others. Don't wait until someone is desperate before you see them clearly. Don't mistake silence for strength or word for wisdom. And when someone shows up at your rest, tired, honest, asking only to contribute, look at them the way rested, not with servicing, with recollection, because sometimes the person who needs a place to land is exactly the person who will help you find your way home.